Hello, welcome to another edition of the CNA's Opus. My name is Rich, certified nursing assistant, and I got up this morning and I was looking at my board right here, and sometimes this board gets in my way. Most of the time it does. So a lot of times I like to just kick things from my head. And I woke up this morning, I was thinking about the mucosal ciliary escalator, which is part of the innate immune system. Excuse me. What happens is in the bronchi going towards the lungs is it has these columnar epithelial cells all the way around it. So all the way around it has these columnar epithelial cells, and then within it, some of them are these modified columnar epithelial cells called goblet cells, and they secrete mucus. Now on the apical side, towards the lumen of the bronchi, they have the cilia there. So the mucus is getting put onto the cilia, and that right there is the foundation of the mucocilia escalator. Right there is that cilia. Right there is going to cleanse the mucus. It's these finger-like projections that are going to constantly rid the mucus, and then new mucus is going to be produced, and then it's going to cleanse that mucus, and new mucus is going to be produced. The reason that's occurring is that if you inhale a pathogen, or even dirt, or an allergen, or anything like that, and it gets caught in the mucus right there, the cilia will move that mucus out. It'll go to another bronchi, and then finally to the primary bronchi, whether it be the right or the left, whatever lung it's going to. It'll go to the right or the left, and then it'll go up into the trachea, which has cilia as well, and that'll move it, keep moving it through the larynx, and finally into the esophagus. And then once into the esophagus, it'll go down into the stomach, where whatever it was, whether it was a pathogen or if it was something harmless like an allergen, or dirt or whatever, it's burned up in the stomach acid. That's part of the innate immune system. Now, outside of those columnar epithelial cells, you have the basement membrane, and the basement membrane is attached to the epithelial cells via these integrins, which are these adhesion molecules. So the basement membrane just holds those epithelial cells in place, so they don't start rearranging one another or collapsing on one another or whatever. And outside of that, you have the lamina propria. And inside the lamina propria, you have an immune cell called the mast cell, so I'm not going to get into right now. And then you have certain blood vessels, and that right there makes up the mucosa. It's the epithelial cells, the basement membrane, and the lamina propria are the mucosa. That right there, that whole region right there. Outside of that, you have this smooth muscle tissue, which is not part of the mucosa. I don't know why. I don't ask questions why. Smooth muscle tissue is not part of the mucosa, even though it is in the bronchi. And outside of that, you have these submucosa glands, which produce mucus that makes its way back. Those again are columnar epithelial cells that are producing mucus. Submucosa glands that are producing mucus, and they make their way back into the lumen of the bronchi. So those submucosa glands are putting mucus onto the cilia as well as the goblet cells. So you have two things putting mucus onto the cilia of the 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 lumen of the epithelial cells within the bronchi, which again constantly gets cleansed to get rid of anything that's sticking to it or adhering to it. The problem with asthma, and I want to go into cystic fibrosis too, but I'm going to go with asthma right now. The problem with asthma is that if people don't get treatment, they don't go to a medical doctor and get treatment for asthma, and it continues and it's frequent and it gets more intense as it goes on, and either they're non-compliant with medications or they don't get treated at all, or whatever the case may be, is the smooth muscle tissues during the asthma attack constrict. So the whole mucosa gets constricted. And this happens, if it happens frequently, over and over and over and over and over again, what happens is a smooth muscle tissue, just like any other muscle, it's getting worked, and then it's getting fed, and when it's getting worked and it's getting fed, it enlarges, and when it enlarges, the muscle is stronger, so it can exert more force, and when it can exert more force, the lamina propria, which is right underneath it, has to compensate. It has to compensate. Otherwise, the smooth muscle tissue will exert so much force on it that it'll just smash the bronchi. So the lamina propria has to compensate for that pressure. So that has to enlarge. So the lamina propria gets larger and thicker and thicker and thicker to compensate for that pressure from the smooth muscle tissue during these asthma attacks that are occurring on and 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 on. And because when the lamina propria becomes thicker, the lumen within the bronchi gets smaller. And it can get stuck that way. It can get stuck that way. So now you had a person with asthma who had trouble breathing just during asthma attacks. If they don't get treated, if they don't go to a medical doctor and get treated for it, it could actually get stuck like that. And then now they're going to have problems breathing all the time. Not just during asthma attacks, because now the bronchi got stuck like that. Another thing that I want to touch base on really quick is, I do have this stupid board here, so I might as well just fucking do it. Is right here, because this will tie in with allergens. Right here is we have the antigen right here, or you could see fucking board. So right here we have the antigen right here, or it could be an allergen. So allergen's a protein that the body kind of recognizes as foreign, and it'll produce antibodies for, or immunoglobulins, which are just the proteins that make up the antibodies. The thing that's interesting, and I'm going to stick with antigens, the thing that's interesting about antigens is it can have different epitopes. It could have different epitopes. So it could have different binding sites for the antibody on the same antigen. So you could have multiple antibodies for different epitopes on the same antigen. So this region right here, if you look right here, this is the heavy chain connected by a disulfide bond, and these are the light chains over here and over here, again connected by disulfide bonds. This region up here is the fragment antigen binding region right here. And this region here has like almost infinite variations, because not only will it create different variations for different antigens, but it could create different variations for the same antigen via different epitopes. Down here, this portion, which I'll call the segmentation, because it's what's similar between different antibodies, is called the fragment crystallizable. Fragment crystallizable. Which it's a rather odd name, but whatever. This portion down here, and there's only 9 of them. So immunoglobulin, just shorthand for immunoglobulin, is IgA. So Ig, immunoglobulin, IgA. So we have IgA. There's only 9 of them. IgA 1 to 2, IgM, IgG 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's IgD, and then IgE, which will bind to, actually IgE will bind to the mast cells. But that is, this here is the segmentation, because even though there's a variation of 9 of them, let's see, even though there's a variation of 9 of them, it's still kind of a segmentation. It's still kind of a segmentation, because when you compare 9 to the infinite amount of variations that could be within the fragment antigen binding region right here, because that could be for multiple antigens and multiple epitopes on the same antigen. So that could be almost infinite right there. So we have the variation and the segmentation. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about variation and segmentation, because variation and segmentation are exactly what natural selection depends on. So we have segmentation, like our ribs, or segmentation. The DNA within our cells is segmentation. It's replicated. It's copied. It's a segmentation. It's a segmentation. And then you have a mutation, which is the variation. So those two things are absolutely, I know it sounds like a simple concept, but those two things are what natural selection depends on, is segmentation and variation. And I think that's it. Next, I think I'm going to go into cystic fibrosis. I did study the work of Francis Collins, who discovered the alleles for cystic fibrosis, which is a Mendelian trait. So I really I want to go into that and go a little bit deeper into maybe the genetics of this. So that's it. Rich, CNA. See you later.